Hey, welcome to My Mama Summer. My name is Aimee Devlin. I'm an unconventional millennial mother living abroad, building a business and raising children while stepping into who she's meant to be. This podcast is an audio version of my newsletter, which you can find at mymamasummer.com. The episodes are short, wholehearted reflections of my life as a mother, business owner, and everyday human committed to being the best she can be. Pop in your headphones, grab a cuppa and a cookie, and take this time to just be with me. Hey everyone, and welcome back to My Mama Summer. We have a beautiful episode for you today with a homeopath and health coach. Her name is Lisa Strbac. One of the reasons why I really wanted to get Lisa on, aside from her expertise and the beautiful way that she clarifies homeopathy for the layperson, is because she was a former skeptic. And so she's someone who has seen both sides. Homeopathy is a realm that a lot of people find it really challenging to understand. And the way that Lisa explains not only to, people on interviews, but also to her students in her courses and her patients or clients, whatever you'd like to call them, she really nails it down to the essentials and has people understand this at a core level, which is something that I truly value because I'm of the belief that homeopathy is one of the most powerful healing modalities that we have available to us. And Lisa and I were just talking off air about the reasons for that. And for me, they are things like the compliance aspect. It's very easy to take a tiny little pill that doesn't even taste of anything in comparison to a herbal medicine that might be incredibly bitter. And to try and get your 3-year-old child to take that is impossible. So the reason that Lisa is joining us is because she's going to talk about how to help us prescribe homeopathy for ourselves at home. And I have a lot of mothers and women who listen to my podcast, and homeopathy is one of the best things you can do for yourself, for your children, to have a little kit at home. And Lisa will talk us through how to do that. It's something that's so simple. And Lisa and I are going to talk about the first stage of homeopathy, the easiest stage, which is how to prescribe first aid remedies for yourself. And this is where you can really start to take charge of your health and the health of your family by seeing homeopathy at work. So Lisa, I was going to bring you on there, but there's so much to talk about. You've got a new book out that came out a month ago that goes into depth into the healing powers of homeopathy. That's not really a self-prescribing guide, but your other book, The Homeopath in Your Hand, is. And so today's episode is more about that particular book. And I'm sure we'll have Lisa on to talk about the more deeper aspects of homeopathy. But really, the first aid aspect is the first port of call. And so that's what we're going to talk about with you here today. So Lisa, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on. And what a lovely and amazing introduction. You're just absolutely on the same resonance with homeopathy and how you feel about it as to me. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. One of the first introductions to homeopathy that I had was actually from a coworker. So I used to work at a casino. And I had that was like a whole other life for me. I did that for 10 years, but there was one guy who was older than me. He was probably in his 50s and I was in my 20s. And we had a great connection and we were both into natural health. And he had studied a lot of different things, body work and naturopathy and homeopathy. And he was a real gun. And so I would always hope that my break would fall at the same time as him so we could just chat for 15 minutes. And then go back upstairs and, do the work that we were there to do. But Paul, when I was talking to him one day and I was telling him how I always got bitten by mosquitoes, he came to work the next day and he brought me a couple of homeopathic remedies. And this was my very first introduction to homeopathy. And he brought me 2 remedies, sulfur and ledum. And he said, just if you get bitten, kind of like take a few pills and see what happens. And I did. And I am someone who comes up in like big welts when I get bitten by a mosquito. And they stay itchy for a long time. And those 2 remedies, he's like, just try one and see if, how it goes and then try the other one. And I did and they worked. And I was like, this stuff's really cool. This is awesome.
I love that. You have to experience it for yourself a lot. Well, it depends. Not everyone does. I certainly did. I and can be quite stubborn on my views. And yeah, I was a total skeptic. But when I saw that it worked, I was like, wow, what is this? Because when it works, it really works. And it's incredible. And it kind of changes your way of thinking about health and what is medicine. And yeah, when you realize how remedies are made, it just totally blows your mind. So yeah, there's lots to discuss. Like, let me know where you want to get started, because I love sharing about homeopathy, and I'm really passionate for families at home and parents to be using homeopathy on their children, because a lot of my daughter's health issues I know arose due to sort of suppression of her regular first aid or acute situations that I didn't know any better at the time. And we know that suppression and suppressing illnesses can create sort of a toxic overload and create chronic illnesses. So I think that the power of using homeopathy for these first aid situations at home has such, profound effects that we may not even realize.
Absolutely. That's what I've experienced as well. One of the things that I see in today's world is that we are so intent on just stopping things from happening. We just want to be able to not feel the symptom, or not go through the pain or the grief or whatever it is. It's like we have to keep going. We have to keep hustling. We don't have time to stop. And I feel like a lot of our modern medicine practices are based on that. It's like, okay, you don't need to take time off because you can just suppress. And then how many years later, you have all of this stuff still inside of you that needs to come out somehow. So the earlier we can implement this kind of healing method, especially with our children, and not allow that to happen, the better we all are, right?
Absolutely. And even modern medicine does acknowledge, in some respects, the concept of suppression. So you take something quite simple like a skin issue or eczema, where people use steroids to suppress that rash back in because it's not actually getting to the root cause. It's obviously just eliminating the symptoms. Why did we get the rash in the first place? And even allopathic Western medicine will say actually there's a link between steroid use and, say, asthma later on in life. And that's because we're suppressing, our body's trying to eliminate via the skin, we're suppressing it back in. Where does it go? We drive that disease deeper, and it can quite often then go to the lungs. So even modern medicine will say actually there's a link between like skin issues and, say, asthma. But it's just, we don't connect the dots, because I guess a lot of the time in Western medicine, and not to bash it, because actually I believe we need an integrated approach, but the Western system is right. It's let's keep going, let's treat the actual label, the clinical diagnosis, let's get rid of the symptoms, rather than actually what's going on. Why did you get that symptom? Actually, sometimes the body needs to detox. Sometimes it's good to get a fever because actually, it gives us a chance to rest and eliminate and get rid of some of our toxic load, and then we're healthier and stronger after. So there's just a total sort of mismatch, really, I think, between Western medicine and, I don't even like to call it alternative medicine, because to me it's the original medicine.
Same. I sort of pause every time I say that. Like, no, it's not alternative.
Yeah,
it is the medicine. It's the real one. So I guess we could start at, for those who really don't understand what homeopathy is and how it's created, like, what are the laws of homeopathy? How does it actually work?
Okay, so shall I start at the beginning with how it was actually discovered by Hahnemann?
Let's do it. Yes.
Okay, so Hahnemann was a medical doctor over 200 years ago, and he was very disillusioned with medical practices at the time. There was a lot of bloodletting and using mercury for various things, and he kind of was a bit disillusioned and was doing some medical translation. And when he was translating, he came across some literature about the Peruvian bark, and it said that it was a really good herbal medicine for symptoms of malaria. What he found really interesting was that the symptoms that someone in a healthy state gets when they take Peruvian bark, they get the symptoms of malaria. And yet when a person with malaria takes Peruvian bark, it heals them. So he actually took the Peruvian bark and realised that he got the symptoms of malaria, and he thought, is there a way to make this so that it's less toxic, so there aren't these side effects? So we're not quite sure exactly how he got this sort of divine inspiration or download or whatever you want to call it. But he decided to potentize the Peruvian bark, and I'll talk you through how he did that. But he basically made it so it was non-toxic. He got rid of all the toxicity and he made it so it was like an energetic version of the Peruvian bark. And what he realised was it still cured the people that had the symptoms of malaria, actually probably more effectively than the raw solid material form Peruvian bark. But actually, if someone that was healthy took it, they no longer got the symptoms. So this is this like cures like principle. If someone with symptoms has a matching remedy, then it will cure those symptoms. And so he started kind of experimenting with lots of other substances, seeing, right, well, Peruvian bark, it has the symptoms of malaria. What are other substances? What symptoms do they produce? So another like well-known homeopathic remedy, arsenicum, which is made from arsenic. So in its raw form, obviously it's toxic and poisonous. But in a homeopathic form where there's no material substance left, and I'll talk you through that in a moment, it will cure someone with symptoms of generally diarrhea, vomiting, flu symptoms, chills, restlessness, anxiety. And that quite often actually is the picture we might get with people that are labelled with COVID symptoms. So it's like one of the number one remedies for people with COVID symptoms. So there is this element of individuality. You have to match the symptoms of the individual to the remedy. And that's where people can find it overwhelming or confusing, because it's not like even with herbs to some extent or other natural modalities. It's like, what remedy do I take if I've got a cold? Well, we might take echinacea or vitamin C, or if we've got flu symptoms. But with homeopathy, we want to get really individual. For example, you might have flu symptoms where you feel really tired, zombie-like, you can't kind of move, everything aches. That might be sort of more Gelsenium type picture, as where I might be that kind of restless. Actually, I feel really anxious and I have more sort of nausea and stomach issues. That might be arsenicum. So we're always trying to match, and it's why we need to get out that mindset as well of what remedy do I take for X named condition, because we're treating the individual. So the other thing that's really important with homeopathy is, so I spoke about how Hahnemann removed the toxicity. So what happens, the way you make a homeopathic remedy, you just take one part of the original substance, say that's arsenic or belladonna, which is deadly nightshade, or it might be something like arnica, which is mountain daisy, but you take one part, that original substance, and it's diluted with 99 parts of liquid. And then it's succussed, which is where we mean shaken, which sounds a bit woo-woo, but if you think of the work of Veda Austin and the work that's coming into water to release energy. So that then gives you a 1C. You often see homeopathic remedies have like a C, in a number. So it's C stands for centesimal scale. And then what happens is we take one part of that already diluted sort of liquid of the 1C, we take one part of that and we mix it again to 99 parts and shake it, succuss it again. That gives you a 2C. So we keep going through that process. Now, most homeopathic remedies that you'll get in kits come in a 30C. So it's been through that process 30 times. And what modern science will say is that once it's gone past the 12C, there's no chemical substance left. If you look at that liquid under a microscope, you won't be able to see any molecule. And that's why scientists or modern science say, well, homeopathy can only be placebo because there's nothing in it. But actually, it's not based on chemistry, it's based on physics. We're seeing like that coming out more and more with like the work on water. And all that emerging science. So that's where the modern scientists say it can't work. And then the other thing just on how remedies are made, just to finish up, one loose end people might have is they might think, hang on, you've just spoken about it being made in liquid, but I get it in pills. So how does that work? So what happens is when the homeopathic pharmacies make up those liquid potencies, they will then just get a little pill, sugar pills that you see, and it will be coated with that liquid. So those little sugar pills just act as a carrier for the liquid solution. So it's not like the pills, I used to think the pills, had something ground up in them. They don't. They're literally just a carrier for that liquid solution where the remedy's been made. It's very, very different, even from herbs, or people think like homeopathy is like essential oils or herbal remedies. It's not. It's totally different. It's energetic medicine. And that's why it's safe in pregnancy and breastfeeding and for newborns.
That was a beautiful and really easy to understand conceptual explanation of how it actually works. It's kind of like the two things cancel each other out, right? So like you've got the disease or the symptoms and then the remedy, and they kind of, when they're in the right environment, they like meets like, and then it sort of makes this amazing reaction.
It's sending a message to your vital force. This is what you need to do. Like, this is, quite often we get stuck, and particularly you see it with emotional aspects as well. The body kind of gets, disease happens, and there's different ways disease happens, but when we get stuck, like sometimes we can't process or move through it. And that those remedies are kind of sending a little message to the vital force, which is our life force, our energy, our chi or prana, whatever you want to call it, to say, come on, this is what you kind of need to do. And the disease or the symptoms just fall away, really, once it has had that message to stimulate that self-healing.
Yeah, because it's an energetic medicine. This is one of the reasons why I feel that it works really beautifully on children, is because children are light beings that are incarnating. Steiner, he talks about the children, especially in the first 7 years, are in the process of coming into the body and into themselves. They're incarnating for a long time. They're not really here yet. They're in a dream world. And things like homeopathy and flower essences and these kind of energetic medicines, frequency medicine, works really beautifully on kids because of that. Like, they're not as dense and grounded as adults are.
Absolutely. I mean, when you see it work on children, how quickly, like, I often think if we just had a few remedies that were in hospitals or just in every home, like croup, for example, kids can have really, I mean, it sounds horrible. My youngest daughter was really susceptible to croup. And that horrible barking, cough that would start at midnight, always normally after midnight, and then it starts. Aconite, the number one remedy for croup. It would be amazing, like, if every time, all these kids that go into emergency rooms because they've got croup and struggling to breathe, if the paediatricians, they just knew about aconite, it would be amazing to use just to begin with in those settings, to even use alongside. But if parents have them, the amount of times just that one remedy has absolutely helped really profoundly. And you see it just like that when you get the right remedy.
And that really, what's the word, like counteracts the whole placebo thing, because it works on pets, it works on children, and they don't understand what's going on. They're not the one who's going, oh, well, maybe this will work for my croup. They're just, they're just like, okay, Mum, give me that, put it on my tongue.
It works on plants even. And that was my first really, where the world changed moment, when I gave my daughter her first remedy as a skeptic. Sort of in desperation, it was for a chronic health issue, so we'd gone to see a homeopath, and I gave it to her in water, put the pill in water, and I just gave her one little sip of the water. So my daughter didn't even know she was having a remedy, and the reaction was almost instant. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was like, what on earth is going on? Because I just thought, there's nothing in it. Like, this is just a load of old nonsense. And it blows out the placebo. And that's the other thing as well. The arguments about placebo, you have to find the right match. If you don't get the right match, it won't do anything. And I've had it where I've been absolutely convinced I've got the right remedy, right, for an acute. I'm convinced, that one, that's it. Yeah, I've got a headache, that one. And it does nothing. And then I will try another one and it does nothing again. I'm like, homeopathy does work, but the point is you have to have the right match. And then I'll be like, the third remedy, okay, I'll try this one, and then it will just go instantly. And I'm like, okay, I'm like, obviously didn't have the right match the first. And if it was placebo, I'm telling you now, the first remedy would have worked, not the third one, because I was kind of giving up a little bit by the time I tried the third one. So to me, it's just not placebo. So I find that really annoying when people, I get why people say it, but yeah, it's like, no, it's not. It doesn't work on plants and animals and babies if it's placebo.
Yes, absolutely. So in Australia, I'm trying to think of the year. It was probably like the early, maybe like 2012 onwards. There was a real war on homeopathy in Australia. And then, it continues on and on and on, but I was plugged into it at that particular time. And the messaging that was coming out showed me from every angle that they just had zero idea how it even works. Because on one level, they were saying, it's a placebo. On another level, they were saying it was dangerous. And, we got to ban this thing because it's homeopathy and you can't take it and it's dangerous. And then on the other hand, they're saying, here's a study we did. We gave everyone the same remedy and it didn't work on anyone. And so therefore homeopathy doesn't work. And so they're just so confused. They have no idea how it even works. The studies that they design, it's impossible to even, like, you can't do it in that way. And so it's just like this blanket, no, it doesn't work, so let's just ban it. It's a very interesting and weird kind of very confused government, medical. Ours is the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Association. We've got the FDA. What's the UK version of that? Do you have one?
That's really good, actually.
It's not in my head.
Yeah, no, like it's probably multiple smaller ones.
Yep.
But like the FDA are going down that route as well, because they now said that homeopathic medicines need to be subject to the same approval as standard medicines. How can they when you see how they're made? We have a separate carve out in the UK for homeopathy. It's acknowledged that they're kind of a separate medicine in their own right, but then it's not actually as, it's bizarre. It's not as freely available in the UK. Like you don't find it in health food shops, but then we have some amazing homeopathic pharmacies that you can order from online or phone up. And yet we have King Charles, who is the patron of the Faculty of Homeopathy. And really, whatever you may think about the royal family, I won't go in that one. That's a whole nother podcast episode. Yeah. But whatever, we may think about the royal family, I find it really peculiar that they all use homeopathy. King Charles is a massive proponent. He used to be ridiculed in the newspapers because of how much he supports homeopathy. And yet it's still not even in the UK, spoken about favourably in the press. Maybe that's turning ever so slightly since King Charles has become king and he's more supportive, but sort of openly. But it's weird. It's like it shows you there's something else. Like it's the media. There's another layer of blocking here, because if the king can use it and it's still not seen as being something credible, let's go to ask, why is that?
Totally.
Well, we know, but
And we, yes, we do. I honestly feel like there's a bunch of reasons it could be, and we could speculate, but I think they're the reasons why we love it so much, is that once you get a handle on the most important remedies to have at home and to how to use them, and you're taking charge of your family's health and you're not so reliant on external sources. Even, if you cover the most important remedies in your house, like, you don't necessarily even need to see a homeopath to prescribe them, right, for first aid purposes. Yes, you might have something come up that, you've got something blocked and stuck and you feel like you need to move through that or something, and you might go see someone for that purpose. But in the way that we're talking about it today, in relation to the first aid and acute kind of symptoms, it really puts the power in our own hands, and that's scary for them.
Yeah, and there's an amazing quote actually by, I hope I'm going to pronounce her name right. Is it Leslie Manookian, who was the director of the Health Freedom Defense Fund in the US? She was the ex-Wall Street banker that managed to get the mask mandate withdrawn in the US.
I'm a legend.
She is a legend, and she said, and I'm going to perhaps not quote this spot on, but just the essence of it. She was quoted as saying, and I did get a permission previously to relay this, homeopathy is the biggest threat that exists against the pharmaceutical industry because it's non-toxic, it's cheap, you can use it on pregnant women, you can use it on babies, no trouble at all. You can use it for acutes, you can use it for chronics, but it's a threat because it actually works. And that is the issue. That's why we
got chills.
Yeah, and she sums it up, and it's not just that. Like when you start using homeopathy, I've seen this from people that have done like my courses, particularly during lockdown, during COVID, when people had a lot more time, I guess, on their hands and were looking for alternatives. I'd have people come on my courses that were perhaps really nervous, but looking for something more alternative, something they could do in their own homes. And these people do total like 180 once they've got into like, wow, homeopathy works. Oh my God, I can use it like for all these issues. I don't need to go and see a doctor for, just for things like teething and coughs and colds and fevers. And then they learn about actually fevers are the cure. And even the UK medical guidelines say that antipyretic agents, so paracetamol and ibuprofen, shouldn't be used with the sole purpose of reducing a fever. And that comes from like the UK's own medical establishment saying that. And then they start to look into other areas, actually, like, oh, what else have I not been told the truth about? This homeopathy works. And like suddenly these people are homeschooling their kids and, everything changes. Like it really, like your life can change so much because you realize, this is what happened for me anyway. As I used to be an accountant in a big four accountancy firm and like, really knee deep in the matrix, doing everything right. And then I remember thinking, if homeopathy works and they've lied to me about this, what else is there that isn't quite as it seems? So it can be like a whole rabbit hole that you go down once you discover this, which is, I think, is another reason I don't like to say that we're not, this isn't out there, and being pushed. You have to share homeopathy. You're not going to find it on the news or in social media like easily. The algorithm doesn't like it. So we have to share this because it is so empowering.
It's like Pandora's box, what you just described. It's like the gateway drug. It's like, oh no, if they find homeopathy, they're going to find out everything else.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think
it's true though. It's true.
It's like, I could take a remedy that has actually nothing chemical in it. There's energy in it, but nothing in it, and it heals me, and it actually provides long-lasting cure. And okay, so maybe we don't live in the material world that we're taught about. It really does make you start looking into everything.
It's right, because if you're a thinker, if you start to evaluate your life around you, then everything starts to fall apart. Really, if you're someone who's been, like, oh, well, I had a headache and I took this homeopathy and now I don't have a headache anymore, but there's supposedly nothing in there. And they keep telling me that there's nothing in there, but it's working. And like, the dissonance, the cognitive dissonance happens. And then, you've got to go one way or the other, right? You've got to kind of evaluate, okay, well, if that's what they're saying, then, what else are they saying that isn't true? And then before you know it, you're one of us.
Yeah, absolutely. That is kind of how it goes in a nutshell, whether you like it or not. That's what happens.
Well,
it's great. It's a great, like, the awakening experience can be tricky at times, but it's worth it. Yeah.
Agreed. We, meaning my husband and I, used to have a different podcast a long time ago, in around 2014. And there's a man, you probably haven't heard of him, but he's an Australian homeopath. His name's Isaac Golden.
Oh, of course I've heard of him.
Okay, cool.
Legends. Yeah.
He is a legend, and he's gone up against people again. He's been banned from this and that and all kinds of different things. But we spoke with him about homeoprophylaxis, which he's not allowed to kind of really, he has to go about the way he talks about it and stuff. That was a really interesting conversation, and yet another rabbit hole to go down, because then parents start wondering, well, why am I doing this when I could be doing that?
Yeah, and the whole topic on homeoprophylaxis, what I would say, like, you've obviously done a podcast on it, but if another great place to look, Real Immunity website has some great stuff on homeoprophylaxis. But there's one study, the Cuban leptospirosis study. Did he talk about this?
He did, and I love it. Go into it. I love this study. It's amazing. Okay.
I'm probably a bit sketchy on the exact details, but I think so. In Cuba, every year they tend to have leptospirosis outbreaks, which is a bacterial-borne disease, allegedly, that happened. That's a whole nother topic, but in water. So in the rainy season, every year they tend to get these big outbreaks. And one year they couldn't vaccinate for whatever reason. They normally mass vaccinated. So they decided to give homeopathy preventatively, which is what we call homeoprophylaxis. So they got leptospirosis and they made it into a homeopathic remedy. So the remedies just contain the energetic imprint of this disease, which we call nosodes. So they gave it to 2.3 million people. And the results were amazing. I think there was like over an 84% reduction in leptospirosis, but it was like statistically significant that it was obviously working and even better than sort of the regular interventions. Fantastic study. I think it was 2001. They couldn't get it published in any mainstream medical journal. Bearing in mind, these weren't homeopaths doing this. These were conventional doctors who did this, who weren't homeopaths, but they decided to use it. And the only journal they could get this published in was Homeopathy Journal. And so, I mean, that says everything really, because homeopathy is like cheap, pretty much almost free. Like, you know, it's so cheap to make these remedies and there's no toxic side effects. It's not like with other vaccinations where we're adding in, like, forget about like the science of whether they work and all of that. But if you just think they're like, if they're similar, they've got toxic ingredients added to them. The homeopathic nosodes are just the energetic imprint. So I think if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. really wants to make vaccines safe and look at safer alternatives, he would be looking, if he really genuinely wants to do that, he would be looking straight at homeoprophylaxis and this study where they had over 2 million people.
Yeah.
It's incredible, the potential.
You can't argue with that. So all you have to do is slide it under the carpet and try and stop people from seeing it. That's what they did.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it was incredible. So you can Google that. You know, there's people trying to sort of debate why it wasn't a great study or whatever. But if you Google it, there will generally be something that comes up in the British Medical Journal where they have a really good discussion about it, actually.
Awesome. I'll see if I can dig that up and put it in the show notes. I think Brendan just re-released that episode. That was probably from 2014, so it's like 10 years old when we interviewed him. But we recently listened and we were like, that needs to be heard again.
What a different landscape. We were talking about this, you know, so the weekend I tutor at a homeopathy school. We were talking about this just at the weekend just gone, saying this is a totally different time post-COVID to be a homeopath. That even before COVID, I would never really speak vocally out there because it didn't feel safe to do so. And so many people are now talking, you know, it's changed massively. COVID has changed the health field forever. And so that was really brave of Dr. Isaac Golden to be speaking about this all those years ago when it was really hard to talk about anything like this. So yeah.
And he's just been slammed so many times that he just keeps getting back up. He just reinvents himself in another way. I mean, I haven't really been following him in these last years. Maybe he's more free now. But when we interviewed him, it was like APRA, the Australian Health Practitioners Registration Agency or something like that, right? I'll probably butcher that, but it's basically like where you have to be registered to be able to practice medicine, you know. So what they've been trying to do for a long time is to get all of the natural health modalities, so you have to be registered, and then that means you have to abide by the rules of APRA, which then means that they can take your license away if you don't abide by their rules. Whereas if you're not registered, then you don't have to follow their rules because you're not registered. So they've been on a campaign to try and make everything registered. And I'm not sure where it's at because I stopped listening to that stuff a long time ago. But when I was into that, it was like, well, we'll take his license away, or now we'll make him do a public apology for trying to sell these homeoprophylaxis things. And now we'll try and like raid his office for this thing. And it's just an endless stream of things that they try and do to make you give up. And then, you know, they will go hunt someone else kind of thing. And they did that with another guy. I'm trying to think of his name. It escapes me, but he was big. You know, they went and stole all of his records and, you know, all of that kind of stuff to try and save everyone. But really, it's just because they're scared that we're going to take our own responsibility for our own health. And we can.
Yeah, and you really can, and you don't need that many remedies to get started with using homeopathy at home. It can feel very overwhelming, like when you see how many hundreds of remedies. Well, there are thousands of remedies, but for home prescribing, maybe there's a few hundred that you use. But I started with 4, like when I first started out, and you can have like 4 or 5 core remedies and they will see you through so many different things. So you just start somewhere and, you know, just with whatever you feel comfortable with. And soon enough, you'll be hooked and be building your homeopathy kits and getting more and more into it once you start.
So what were those 4 remedies for you? And are they the ones that you would recommend others?
Yeah, actually, I'd say there's 5. So, you know, particularly for kids. So I would say definitely you want aconite. Aconite is for anything sudden onset inflammation. And I use it as well, like if you just want to nip a cold in the bud. If we need to get sick, this is a question I often get asked, will it stop me getting sick? I thought, you know, detoxing is good. My perspective, if you need to get sick because you have got such toxic overload, you will. But if you know, have just got a little cold brewing, it can raise your vital force enough that it just bounces off. So aconite, anything for nipping anything in the bud, really good for croup. It's great actually for panic attacks and anxiety, kind of shock. It's this remedy. It's got a very kind of shock energy to it. So it can help with those situations. Then there's belladonna, which can look like aconite because it's sudden onset as well, but it tends to be much more red and throbbing. So think of like tonsillitis or scarlet fever, or kids that get fevers but with like bright red burning faces, or they might have sort of the dilated pupils. They might even be hallucinating when they have fevers and not even recognize their parents, have that kind of delirium. It can be really intense. And then chamomilla, got to have chamomilla. That's for teething and colic symptoms and really angry so energy coming off these children.
That's my daughter. She's a chamomilla.
Yeah, and okay, so to contrast, pulsatilla is the other remedy that I think you really, really want, and can be great for teething, but it's for like these weepy, clingy children that often have like this green snot, they can be quite snotty. And the difference, you might find that I've had one of each. So you might have a baby that's more chamomilla or pulsatilla with teething. But the way you sort of think about it is, if you're holding your baby and they're teething and they're still kind of giving off like cute, you still kind of want to cuddle them and they're just a bit whimpery and you feel sorry for them, that's pulsatilla. If they're like this ball of like rage and it's making you feel really agitated because they're so angry, and you're picking up on it, that's chamomilla. So again, it's just matching the different energy. I've had a chamomilla teething baby and I've had a pulsatilla, and the pulsatilla parents, you're so much luckier. We love our children the same, but chamomilla babies. And they're the type of, when toddlers are sort of having tantrums and they ask for something and then you give it and then they don't want it anymore. And then they want to they want to be held, but they don't want to be looked at. It's just the difficult energy. So therefore, and then you've got to have arnica, which is number one for bumps and bruises and accidents. So yeah, they're the 5. If you start with those, you've got most bases covered.
That's awesome. I have, definitely got a chamomilla pain. I was just laughing when you were saying all those things. I was like, yeah, that's her.
Yeah, it's one of the angriest remedies in our whole materia medica, but it's such a great remedy. And you give it to teething babies that are really irate, or just seem that way, their energy, and just the whole nervous system just calms down. And it's great chamomilla for sort of pain generally as well.
Ah, that's good to know. Pain. My daughter will, anytime she hurts herself or something, she'll come up to her. She's like, Annika.
That's so sweet.
And even if I don't have something, I can kind of soothe her, be like, oh, here's some arnica kind of thing, she just knows that's what she needs when she's got a little ouchie.
Oh, that's lovely. And that's, my 2-year-old, when she was 2, she used to come to me and go, Mummy, you couldn't even say it, but homeopathy, and she'd get the kit because she was raised, I felt so sorry for my eldest daughter because she was how I found homeopathy and had a lot of antibiotics and other suppressive medications. But my youngest was just raised pretty much on homeopathy. And yeah, it's just lovely to see how strong a vital force and how quickly they bounce back from illnesses when they're raised more holistically.
You've got the comparison there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I remember when they both got ill, I can't even quite remember. I think I just maybe discovered homeopathy or started to question the conventional system, and they both got sick, and I had she would have been 4, so 4 and then baby, and my 4-year-old with some kind of flu symptoms. My 4-year-old just had this really long, drawn-out fever, sort of low grade, and it just went on and on and on, as when my youngest daughter, who was a baby at the time, had this massive high fever. She had vomiting, diarrhea. It was I'm going to eliminate catastrophically for 24 hours. And then she just was perfectly well afterwards. But my eldest daughter had this, just couldn't get over it because her vital force, where it had been suppressed throughout the years previously, it wasn't as strong. And luckily, with time, with using homeopathy, she could then get really high fevers. But that's actually a good thing because it's showing that the body is vital and can respond to what it needs to create health again.
Yeah. I notice it every time my daughter gets a fever. She comes back it's amazing how fast she comes back. In the middle of the night, I think it's the end of the world. She's like, it's like 1,000 degrees. And then the next morning, I'm thinking, oh God, what's the day going to be like? Because I'm thinking if it was me. But then the next day, she's just like, she's pumped. She's stoked for the day. She's like even more healthier than she was before. And it's so interesting to watch that.
And that's often why, the elderly, they can't raise these high fevers because they don't have a strong vital force for years. Well, with aging anyway, but just with years of suppression or whatever. So it is a really amazing sign of a body that can heal.
Yeah, you've just got to trust it. That's the hardest part as a parent.
And it's really hard when we've been programmed. And we know intuitively, I think, when something's not right and when we should get extra help. We're never saying don't do that, because emergency medicine can be great in moments of life-threatening need. But the thing is, we are taught to use it for everything from antibiotics for ear infections or fevers, Calpol, or what do you call it in...
paracetamol, is that paracetamol?
Tylenol, yeah.
No, Panadol.
Okay, yeah, yep. Okay. So, but just suppressing it, as where we're not taught, actually, these are when things are fine to just treat with alternatives. I don't like that word again.
It's the trust, isn't it? Yeah. One of the things that I love about the way you describe homeopathy is when I heard you say this, I was like, that is absolutely brilliant. You were talking about how remedies, thinking about music, relating to the remedy and the potency and the frequency. So I'd love for you to talk about that too, because that can get confusing as well. It's like, okay, do I need the 30C or the 200 or what do I do? Which one do I buy for my kit? That kind of thing. I'd love for you to share your perspective on that.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So I often think music analogies are brilliant for just trying to understand homeopathy. So I often think the song is like the remedy. So what remedy are we're trying to find? And I often say this with homeopathy, you in that moment, we're trying to find a remedy that's going to resonate with you. And think of if I was trying to find a song that's going to make your hair stand on end, it's going to give you goosebumps in that particular moment. And it might change depending on your mood. So if someone's anxious, they might want, say, a really sort of universal 528 hertz sort of sound music. That might be like an aconite or an arnica. Or if someone's in a really distressed state because they've just broken up with someone and they're really angry, you might want Fleetwood Mac, Go Your Own Way, really so again, it just depends. So that's what we're saying. The remedies have a energetic picture to them. And I often think that's imagine we're trying to choose a song and each remedy is like a song. Which one are we trying to match? And the other thing, just to say, with first aid situations, we often tend to react in a more uniformed way. We get this whole terrain versus germ theory, but actually, if we cut ourselves with a knife, and don't do that, but if we do, we're all going to bleed. Doesn't matter how strong our terrain is. Doesn't matter how, unconflicted we are on a German new medicine side. No, we're all going to bleed if we cut ourselves. And so in that situation, we're all probably just going to need arnica because it's a universal remedy that helps with those situations. So that's why homeopathy for first aid and acute short-term self-limiting illnesses, because we do yes, with flu symptoms, we will have slight variation, but we're still going to have similar symptoms, and then there's going to be a few different remedies to choose from. So that's it, with the remedies and the songs. But then people get confused about potency. So potency is the strength. So where I've talked about the C scale, where regular remedies normally come in a 30C, I would say you shouldn't worry too much about potency. It's the one thing at homeopathy school, everyone gets really worked up about, students, what potency. But 30C is the probably most universal potency. It can touch the mental, emotional layers, and it can still touch the physical. So it's this bridge between physical and mental. That's why it comes in lots of kits. If you go lower, once it's below a 12C, as I've said, it still does contain a slight material dose. So they tend to act more on a physical level. So say you had a broken leg and you'd got the cast on and it was repairing it, and you were using something like Symphytum, which is called knit bone. So don't ever use it until it's actually been set. Otherwise you could fuse the bone at the wrong setting. But you would want that maybe at a lower potency, more like a 6C, where it still does contain a slight material dose, because it's going to work purely on that physical broken leg. Now, some remedies don't come in that low potency. If they're toxic, like arsenicum, you're not going to get them in those low potencies. And then the high potencies, there's no logic to why these scales were made. Like, we don't know why it was 30. It just was. And then the next one is 200. It's a big jump up from 30 to 200. I always say a 200 is like a real slap round the face when someone's in that kind of, and you just need to go snap out of it. That's what a 200 tends to do. So in homeopathy home prescribing kits, you only tend to get 200 more in like childbirth kits.
Yeah.
Because if you think during labour, you've got those really intense emotions. Some people do put home prescribing kits of a 200. Personally, I would always use a 30, because even if a child, say, has a really intense fever, like a belladonna fever, and they're hallucinating and the energy is really strong, you can just give a 30 more often. And the right remedy is always so much more important than the right potency. So the wrong remedy won't do anything, but the right remedy in a potency that's slightly off will still work, but you just might need to dose it more frequently. So I would say 200 personally, like childbirth kits, great, but actually for general home prescribing, just get it in a 30. But if you have got 200, don't worry, use that, but just maybe don't repeat it as often. And if you've got like a 12C, just repeat it more often. And then the next potency up from 200 is a 1M, so that's 1,000. And generally they're only prescribed by homeopaths, and they're going to reach much more into the mental, physical level. So, you know, if we're treating someone for trauma, or for even ancestral trauma or miasmatic stuff, which is stuff we've inherited, then we're going to prescribe perhaps that bit higher. But that is not to say that 30C cannot still work at a really deep level. The results I've seen with 30C, and not just me, my colleagues and friends that are homeopaths, you can see profound shifts and healing even with a 30. So I just tend to say, just get 30. Like, if you're not sure, that's the best universal potency.
That's really good to know, because in Australia specifically, and I know a lot of people listening to this will be from Australia, we can find 30C in health food stores. So that's really cool. It's readily available. And even here in Mexico, walking around San Miguel, my city that I'm in right now, there's actually, I've probably seen at least 10 homeopath stores.
That's awesome.
And that really surprised me when I got here. I was like, another homeopath. Wow, this is cool. So it's used here as well, which is really, really interesting. It's widely available.
That. Yeah, and actually you don't get that in the UK. Like, you know, I know in France, some places in Europe you do. It really is variable. I think there seems to be this sort of vision or thought that Europe has like homeopathy stores everywhere because we use it. And actually in the UK, it's not that easy to find. You can find it, but you know, it's normally you have to order it online or from a pharmacy. In France, it's different. Every pharmacy in France will generally have a homeopathic section, and the pharmacists will prescribe homeopathic remedies before they prescribe the general stuff. So it really does vary depending on where you are. So it's great to know Mexico is like that.
Yeah. One other thing that I wanted to touch on, because you mentioned it briefly. Now, we may not have enough time to go deep into it, but you mentioned about the suppression in the beginning, like the suppression of if you're using steroids and how eczema or dermatitis or whatever might show up, and that's the skin's way of detoxing itself. There is a certain type of homeopathy called detox therapy that I believe has the capacity to kind of lift the imprints of medicines and things that we've taken throughout our lives. And that's something that is really interesting to me because, you know, in my experience, there's some things, no matter how you work on them, you know, maybe you work on them on the psychological level or an energetic level or a physical level, and it just won't go away. And I'm wondering if maybe this is like the missing piece.
Homeopathic detox therapy is incredible. It is something that you should always do with an experienced practitioner. And it's amazing. I mean, I could talk for at length about this, so I try and keep it succinct. But basically, the idea is you give a homeopathic version of whatever toxin that you've had to clear that imprint. So if you think about it, like women that have been on the hormonal contraceptive pill, they can stop taking that pill the pill is well and truly out their system because they've stopped it years ago, and yet their periods or cycles, or they've got hormonal systems, or they can't get pregnant. It's never returned to normal since that. They've never been well since, and yet there's no reason that should still be like that because it's, they've stopped it a long time ago. So there's like an energetic, or there's a layer or a drug layer or a block or an energetic imprint of that hormonal contraceptive pill. So we can detox it by giving the hormonal contraceptive pill back as a homeopathic remedy. And it's basically shining a light to say, hey, this shouldn't be here anymore. Wake up, system, let's get rid of it. There's always an order that you should do it. You can get like quite severe aggravations if you detox certain things in a particular order because, for example, steroids, they can leave the biggest energetic imprint on our system and affect our entire system. So you would always want to do that before you, say, did the contraceptives or antibiotics. So there is a sort of a rough, I don't like protocols because homeopathy is always individualized, but there is sort of a rough way that you should detox these. And if there's been mRNA products, then they should be detox way before anything else. So there's Tom Jansen is an amazing homeopathic kind of pioneer. There's lots of pioneers in it, but he pioneered the type of way that I have worked with this and wrote a book called Fighting Fire with Fire. You get such amazing healing. And like my colleague who I work with and a friend, she's a fertility expert. And she has the most incredible results with couples that have been trying to conceive for like years or with unexplained infertility. And she will detox any drugs that people have had. And she said, generally steroids, antibiotics, the hormonal contraceptive pill, plus they need to detox that, plus they need like the constitutional remedy that fits them as well and organ support. So there's a lot to it. But her success rates are like through the roof of what she will have like 80. I mean, it's crazy. I've asked her for actual stats, but it was something like, 80% will get pregnant within a few cycles. And these have been infertile for years, before they're about to go for IVF. So it has such profound impact. And right now, with how many people have taken the mRNA products and not been well since then, we need to get it out there because people need to know. People just don't even know about this type of homeopathy. And it really is significant how much it can help. But you do need to work with an experienced practitioner for this type of homeopathy. But yeah, I definitely want people to know about it because it is so powerful.
Is that something that you can do? Like, you're in the UK, can you do virtual consultations and that kind of thing and have the remedies sent to people and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, I personally don't have a practice at the moment just because I'm teaching, but most homeopaths, if not all, will work by Zoom now. You do not need to see, you absolutely don't need to see a homeopath in person. I actually think there's some benefits for doing it online as well, because when I first started doing it online during COVID, I was like, oh, I'm not sure about this. I'm like, actually, this is absolutely great. And then remedies can just be sent out in the post. And then pharmacies worldwide that stock these remedies, they are prescription-only remedies, but they can be sent out. So there's absolutely no reason that you can't work with someone online to do it. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. Just like that's another reason, that why we're such a threat. So readily accessible. It's so easy to, well, it's not easy to prescribe, but like easy to access. It's not, my husband's mum goes to see a naturopath all the time. And every time she comes out of that consult, she's got like another $300 worth of supplements. Every time she goes, and she's been seeing him for years. There's that way of doing things, and then there's other solutions, and that's what I really love about homeopathy is the accessibility. And it's not like a classist thing, because a lot of people don't look after themselves because they can't afford it. Like if you're a middle class human who's working a job and you've got a family and you've got a mortgage and all this stuff, you can't be paying $500 every time you go see a practitioner.
Yeah.
It's just not, as much as we would all love to do that, it's just not really possible for the majority of people. And that sucks. That's really sad.
And homeopathy is affordable. Like the remedies are really cheap. And homeopaths, I mean, it varies across the world. I have to say, like in the US, homeopaths do seem to have higher rates, but I think it's because the US, people are used to paying for private health care. Where in the UK, for example, where we allegedly have a free NHS, people aren't so willing to pay for anything because we've like been indoctrinated that health should be free. And so you'll find the UK homeopaths tend to be a lot cheaper priced, and it's nothing to do with like experience or whatever. It's just the market. But obviously now you can see homeopaths anywhere in the world. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Australia, we have the same thing. We have Medicare, which is healthcare that we never use because it's not doesn't have any health component to it. It's like unless you go in and break your leg and they fix it up for you, it's like we don't really have any need for it. But some people need it a lot more than we do. So there's that. But I just wanted people to understand. I think it would be beautiful to have a separate conversation about the depth of that topic. And also some of the other ways, like the other kind of lateral ways that homeopathy can work on us. You spoke briefly about homeoprophylaxis, like preventing something from happening. And then there's miasms, which is a whole other topic. We've got isopathics and, nosodes and all these different kinds of things that the depth and the breadth of homeopathy is mind-blowing. But for this episode, we really just wanted to keep it to what can you do as a mother, as someone, even as a father looking after your family, how can you take responsibility for your health and save money and save poisoning yourself or your family? And it's more simple than you think.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, once you go into homeopathy and start seeing everything and realizing it can help with almost anything, there's no like even to ancestral stuff, but actually we can keep it really simple. And the late Dr. Robin Murphy, he was one of our like legends in homeopathy. He wrote our Bibles and our Materia Medicas. And I've always he's on a pedestal. He's a mate, quite rightly. And I actually had a homeopath, Ian Watson, who wrote the miasm book we were talking about off air. He was on my podcast and he quoted the great late Robin Murphy because Ian's quite like me in that he likes to do the courses and kind of spread the knowledge. And he said to me, Lisa, this is what Robin Murphy said. And it's been revelatory to me, but makes so much sense. He said, so this is what Robin Murphy said. He went, you homeopaths, you think it's all these fancy miasms and constitutional prescribing. But he said, but it's not. He said, the highest form of homeopathy is first aid prescribing. Because as homeopaths, what we're trained to do is we're trained to look at when did the health issues start. And he said, and most chronic issues, if you trace it back, when did it start? It started as a shock, or an accident, or a vaccination that went wrong, or a medical procedure that went wrong, or an acute illness that was suppressed. It started as an acute situation. And if in that moment it had been properly treated, if someone had a homeopathy kit and they knew what to do, we could have prevented that whole cascade of health issues. And I thought, wow, even Robin, like Dr. Robin Murphy agrees with this. So yeah, to really not lose sight, because when you get into homeopathy, you can get excited and start reading all these things and actually remember that it's this home prescribing that is so important, and we don't know what we've prevented by using it at home.
Ooh, I love that. We don't know what we've prevented. When you were saying that quote, I got goosebumps all over my body.
Good. That resonated.
Yeah, so the power is in our own hands, and Lisa's given us a really beautiful basis there of how we can just start, and starting is the most important part if you haven't already. She has 3 books that you can find on her website. I'll put her website in the show notes. Lisa also has a course coming up, which I'd love for you to share about, because I feel like this is the next step for people who are like, oh my God, I just need to learn more about this. You have a course that's starting on the 3rd of January, is that right?
Yeah, so it opens on the 3rd of January and enrollment closes on the 15th of Jan. So I thought I'd give people a little bit of time, like post-Christmas and January, but it will close on the 15th. And you get lifetime access. It's videos broken down into really nice little bite-sized pieces. And it starts from the beginning, from what is health, to why do we get symptoms, to how remedies are made, to potency, how to choose a remedy, and then the top remedies for fevers, why we shouldn't suppress fevers, the top remedies for first aid situations. And it's given you a sort of understanding of the essence of these remedies, like the energetic profile of them. It also goes deeper into how we can make our own remedies out of medicating potencies, how sometimes we might want to use remedies more therapeutically. So like remedies like for liver support, a bit of tissue salts in there as well. So like what kits to have. So covers, there's over 4 hours of lessons broken down, but into really bite-sized pieces, and you get lifetime access to that. And then I'm also running it with some lives. So I'm going to be doing 4 live Q&As. So I've got assortment of time zones because there's people from Australia and from the US and Europe. And then I've also, for this running only, got 4 special guests because I want people to realise sort of the depths of actually looking at our health slightly more widely. So on the first week, I've got Alex Eck coming on to talk about terrain theory and reframing the infectious disease paradigm, because once you realise that perhaps we don't catch diseases in the way we've been told, it's liberating. And then week 2, I've got Jacqueline Dunn coming on. She's a massive UK, she's a homeopath, but she's a health coach and bioresonance practitioner. And she's coming on to talk about the four doctors. So diet, movement, quiet, and joy. Because if we don't have those fundamentals, it doesn't matter how many homeopathy remedies we're popping, we need those basics. And then on week 3, I've got Dawn Lester coming on. She wrote What Really Makes You Ill, to talk about the power of our mind, because actually a lot of sometimes sickness comes from mental disturbances or shocks, which homeopathy can help with. And then we're wrapping up on week 4, which I'm super excited about, with Eileen McCusick, who wrote Electric Body, Electric Health and Tuning the Biofield, because actually we realise that homeopathic remedies are energy, and I think her work has actually got most overlap with homeopathy, although it doesn't come in a pill form. So you get those as a bonus as well, those 4 lives, and they'll be recorded and you get lifetime access. So this is the only time I'm running it with those particular guest speakers, and it won't open again till next, probably late 2025.
Awesome. Well, I'll be there. I will be joining you for that course. I love all of those humans. I don't know Jacqueline, but I know all of the other guests, and they're all stand-up, amazing, incredible humans with just so much knowledge and expertise. So I can't wait to join you on that course.
I'm so glad you're going to be there. I'm genuinely excited. Like, what a way. January is so depressing, and it's like we're going to have these amazing talks and things to look forward to, as well as like learning about homeopathy.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love that it's an extensive look at health, because, you know, a lot of the time people are like, my thing is the thing, but really there's so many aspects to it. I've met so many people along the way who have said that, but then I meet another person and I'm like, oh, that's the thing. You know, it's like all of it is connected and all of it is important, and it can be so easy to get stuck in paralysis and not kind of move forward because of that. I'm going to share the link for your course. It's called Homeopathy Heals. So for anyone who wants to come and join myself and Lisa and all of those awesome humans, please do join us, because I think it's going to be really fun. And also grab a copy of Lisa's books. Just out of curiosity, are you looking at releasing your latest book on Kindle, or is it just going to be a paperback?
I think maybe I should put it on Kindle, actually. See, my books, they are colour. So for people that they've got illustrations in, because to really help you look at the remedies. And so I've always felt like they're better printed, because you don't get the colour on the Kindle, and they make the file sizes so large on Kindle. So it can't be done for the price that I wanted it on Kindle.
Yeah.
So I have got my first one on Kindle because people were asking. Maybe I'll look into it, actually. That is something to do for 2025, because it is good to have it as a backup on your phone, isn't it?
I'm asking because I have a huge library in Australia, but when we moved to Mexico, we had to leave all that behind because at the time there was no shipping. And so all of our books are in Australia, and we had to convert ourselves to Kindle people, which I still don't like. But there is like Ton Jansen's book isn't available on Kindle either. And shipping to Mexico is quite expensive. So I've got like this whole list of books that I haven't got yet because they're not available electronically. I mean, I will get them. I can kind of do it in an about way where I get it shipped to the US and whatever. But I was just curious.
Yeah, no,
I really want it in my hand, though. You know, it's like it is better to read the book, but yeah.
I will send you a copy of my book as a thank you for having me on.
Oh, Lise. That's so kind of you. Thank you. You're welcome. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we left, or share any links or anything else you've got coming up?
I think the main thing is just get started. Don't be overwhelmed. Just literally get aconite and arnica, if for nothing else. And that's it. Just really, really, please, everyone, get started with homeopathy. And the other thing is, please share it with people, because people are going to come across this by fluke or by accident. You are going to have to tell people. So just make sure that you share it, and just let people know about homeopathy. People are so interested. I'll be in taxis in London in black cabs and people are like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I've just been doing a homeopathy lecture. And they're like, oh, what's that? Before, never ever would have had those conversations before COVID. Now people are really interested. So it's the time. Things are changing.
It is. It's a really interesting time because Brennan and I have been, talking about this kind of stuff for a long time, the alternative, like I said, 10 years publicly. And in that time, in the beginning, we interviewed people like I said, like Isaac Golden and Andrew Wakefield and a whole bunch of people who were at the time, so controversial. And it was a real struggle, trying to get people. We had a core, obviously, hardcore listeners who were already into that stuff, but getting out of that bubble and getting new people to listen to that stuff, there was a clear barrier between the alternative people and then the normies, right?
Yeah.
But since especially over the last 4 years, everyone's so much more open, and I didn't think about how that was going to change. All I thought about at the time was oh my God, this is not going to be a good thing. But looking back, I can see how many people have started listening to themselves, started looking for alternatives, started opening that Pandora's box unknowingly, and they're on this alternative path now without even planning it. So it's really cool.
Absolutely. Honestly, the conversations you can have these days, I thought pre-COVID I would have been almost sectioned, but conversations, and now it's you can just talk about homeopathy or it's so much more. People need it. They are looking for something else. In the UK you can't even get a doctor's appointment if you want one. So people really need, you're waiting a couple of weeks really for an appointment now. So people are hungry for something else, and I think they're ready for it. It's time.
Now is the time. Awesome. Yeah. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you. I'm so grateful that you're able to join me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I always love talking about homeopathy, and it's been really wonderful to connect with you. So thank you so, so much.
You're very welcome. If you enjoyed this episode and like reading as much as you do listening, I would love to welcome you as another subscriber to my newsletter. Head on over to mymamasummer.com to subscribe and let me know what you loved most about this episode. I love hearing your feedback. It's my favorite part of sharing what's on my heart. I'll see you over there. Have a beautiful day.